What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Trails Beyond the Horizon, the latest entry in the Trails series as a whole, with this one actually releasing on January 15th. But what I'm bringing you actually is a look at the game's demo that is currently available over on Steam for basically anyone to check out. Truth be told, the main reason I'm taking a look at it via this video is mostly just to satisfy a bit of my own curiosity, because last year I played my first Trails game, Trails in the Sky First Chapter, which was a remake of the original version. That game is the entry into the series, and it has since received a lot of sequels, actually. This one being the 13th, to be specific, I believe. However, that obviously means a couple of things. One, I have no idea what's going on story-wise here. I wanted to take a look at this to sort of just see the other bookend to the series, having played just the original one. I kind of wanted to just see what this latest entry was like, both in terms of mechanics and general gameplay, and just kind of see what had changed and what I can expect over the course of eventually playing through these titles. As a result, I was not terribly interested in the characters or the exact story goings on here, as I obviously wasn't going to know them or anything like that. However, the setup for the latest entry is somewhat interesting because it gets at the heart of something I noticed basically immediately, which was the jump in technology in particular. So in First Chapter, it's a little more, I would say, like traditional JRPG type fantasy, where like you've got things like airships, there are things that are similar to cars but not exactly cars. People are messing around with their orbal stuff, which is how they are doing like all their magic and things via their quartz. And then one part of the later game has more serious technology, and there's remnants of older stuff hanging around. Whereas jumping forward all the way to Beyond the Horizon, they've got like full-on vehicles, modern day tech. Their orbments in this one are actually more akin to like a cell phone. And to top it off, the crux of the story seems to be that they're trying to finally push into space travel, which is at the same time going hand in hand with some mysterious events around the continent. And in so doing, or kind of examining what that was all about, I actually do appreciate the shift in tone as well. If you watched my original videos on the Trails in the Sky First Chapter, one of the complaints that I had after I had finished it was definitely the way some of the writing was presented. And while from what I understand, just from people's comments, the series as a whole is kind of hit or miss with that kind of thing, however, at least just from this demo, I can obviously see that it has evolved a bit over the course of the series, whereas things were taken like much more seriously here all the time. And honestly, it felt a little less anime, I guess is how I would describe it, which is interesting given what people have told me about the other games in the series, I would guess. But it's possible that's just a function of the initial story introduction and that it will change later. But those were some of the things outside of things like the mechanics of it that I noticed pretty much immediately. So I'm actually going to be interested in seeing that evolve over the course of the series when I play these other games. Now, this being a relatively short demo, I would say probably not a huge surprise then that there is a really big emphasis put on combat and gameplay mechanics, because the sort of introduction to the story is that you and several other teams of people have been invited to do some testing for this security company, and I would imagine that people who are up to date with the series likely know these characters and have kind of grown with them over the course of their adventures, but obviously that didn't mean much to me, but it just was clear from the way they were presented that you would know who they are, probably. But over the course of all of these introductions, you're actually running through like this combat AI sim, which is the bulk of the battles and things that you find yourself getting into. And this is where we see the approach of some of what I believe are new mechanics to this game, and then some that are sort of reimaginings of stuff prior, because having played that remake of First Chapter, which I assume more than likely introduced mechanics from later in the series just by the looks of things, it was familiar enough but different at the same time. The core of it's still the same. You've got field and command battles. Field battles allowing you to take out weaker enemies outright, or sort of give yourself an advantageous position to jump into the command battles, which are your more typical turn-based affairs. All of these characters have their arts and crafts, or the various abilities available to them, based mostly on their quartz, or the way they've chosen to set up their tactical, I think orbments is what they were called, with quartz laid into them, which then grants them their abilities and stats and everything. So far so good, but there were some subtle tweaks here and there that I found especially interesting. For starters, little quality of life stuff, like for instance the difficulty of it. So the command and field battles have different difficulties here associated with them. So you could have it like on easy field battles, but on difficult command battles as an example, and I thought that was an interesting touch. But some of the other stuff, like the S boosts as they are called, were a little interesting. So essentially you'll build up these boosts in combat that you can then spend on things like shard commands, which are like wide-ranging buffs from the looks of things, or you can bust out your S moves again, which are these big sort of ultimate type attacks that you can unleash at the costs of these like S power gauges. But you can also use those boosts to activate things like chain attacks, which requires proximity of your allies, and then just being close to your allies, and the positioning on the field is actually going to give you some benefits as well, just based on like who you're close to and standing next to when you, of course, actually use your abilities. The other part of it, though, is the actual timeline bar and the command thing. As with many a turn-based game, there is a sort of initiative order up top, and based on your turn, you can get a variety of benefits based on just the magic of the field. And then you're obviously going to want to try to disrupt enemies, and enemies are going to potentially disrupt you. In fact, one thing I noticed in particular is that I would say just positioning in general is a little more important here than I felt like it was in first chapter, just because, I mean, at least in this demo, it's really easy for enemies to like knock you out of position, and then suddenly your attack hits nothing. And while there was like a little bit of that in first chapter, it was never like a make or break thing, whereas just in this short demo, this seemed to come up a lot here. And yet, as interesting as that isn't everything, because there's also the new ZOC thing. So basically this is the power of your orbments to like just slow down time and give you big damage bonuses. This can be used in field battles to just give yourself massive bonuses to damage and take out enemies very easily while avoiding incoming damage, because the catch to field battles being that if you take enough damage, enemies will start combat with an advantage over you, and so you've got to make good use of your own abilities and dodging out of the way in order to avoid that. And in most cases, this is done by just attacking, dodging, and then using your charge attacks to potentially stun those enemies before, if not outright killing them this way, transitioning into a command battle of your own at an advantage. Well, this ZOC ability allows you to slow down these enemies even outside of regular combat to then potentially take them on outside of those command battles, which I thought was interesting. That was a bit of an evolution of the system from the game I have played. And while it's clear there's still meant to be a transition from, like real-time to turn-based accordingly based on what you're fighting and how easily you want things to go for you. And so to start sort of just bringing this video to a close, I'm obviously not planning to review this game. It's releasing on the 15th. I literally just wanted to check out this demo and kind of see where the series was right now as I begin to move through the rest of these games, starting with the second chapter, which is supposed to be releasing later this year as another remake to the original trilogy. But I did get what I wanted out of this demo, which was exactly that, to see where the series was. And overall, some just immediate takeaways. I enjoy the shift in writing. I'm not sure if that's literally just this latest entry or if that's something that transitioned over the course of the series. I've heard others are like super anime, but the way this game begins via this demo, I'm a fan. I like how they set it up and everything. I also enjoy the shift in technology. You could tell even just that first chapter was like playing around with certain areas being more high-tech than others, and that's really just on full display here. You're practically tripping over incredibly high-tech stuff as you go, as at least the Calvard Republic here seems to be on much more modern footing in terms of technology, both in terms of stuff we actually have and then stuff far beyond our own capability. And then, of course, there's the actual combat system. This is what intrigues me the most because from what I understand, the first chapter remake kind of co-opted some of the later stuff in the series and brought it to the original. And so going from that to this is a little more incremental in terms of its changes, but even then it still feels pretty good. There are some things going on here that I kind of wish that remake had, like for instance, that ZOC ability allowing you to do increased damage to certain enemies, and while it's definitely possible to get overpowered and not have to focus on the command battles so much, it did ultimately kind of feel like just a really set, click, click, stun into command battle like most of the time, and then you usually move that into like an S move and wipe out the enemy. But here you have some more options that make that a slightly more engaging experience, even if it's not exactly groundbreaking action type of stuff. And I did enjoy that overall. But more than anything, I think this gave me a proper idea of what to potentially look forward to as I start playing through the rest of these games in the series, and it'll be interesting to see how it got from point A to point B, basically, is kind of what I had in mind here, and hopefully you, the listener, got something out of that as a video. Sometimes I really do just be making these for me, but either way, certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, or you're planning to play Trails Beyond the Horizon, by all means, let me know what you think about it down in the comments section below. I'd be curious to hear the thoughts of people who are more acquainted with the series than I am, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.